It's okay to do jump cuts. It's sort of an accepted trend that you can sort of lean into. Try it. You might like it. You might not.
It's going to take practice, but just apply these techniques and it will make your video way better.
You know, I've been doing this 20 years. I'm still covering mistakes with B-roll footage or screen recording. But that's what editors do. We take all the bad stuff out and leave you with just the finest, hopefully, so that you actually enjoy watching the video and it was worth your time.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Visual Lounge. Today we are going to be talking about something every video editor needs to know about. It's cutting, splitting, making your videos work better through the editing process by chopping things up, chopping things out, and doing whatever you got to do to make it more concise and just to tell a better story or give a better message. So Andy, Justin, welcome. Thank you for being here with us. It's always, we're so glad that these guys are here to make me look, you know, just okay, because they are so great. I just look okay. Anyway, so let's get into this because we've got a lot that we could potentially talk about. And I'm going to say, let's preface this because this is going to be a little bit different. If you're listening, you may want to go watch the video because we do have a few things to show because we're talking about video editing, but we'll try to be descriptive as possible. I'll also say this is really, I think Justin and I think we agreed that this is Andy's realm. This is where Andy gets to really shine. So if it's mostly Andy and he's your favorite, we're happy for you.
He gets to shine or fail publicly. Either one of those two.
Yes.
Well, it's all good though.
My element.
We're happy because, like I said at the top of the show, right? Like editing is one of the key things that you need to know. And here's the thing: I'm just gonna put this out there. I think editing, like cutting, splitting, the functions are easy to learn. Anyone can learn how to cut things out. But to do it well, this is why video editors get paid good money in Hollywood, because if you can do it well and you can be fast at it, there's really a skill to it. So, Master Andy, teach us some things that we want to know. So let's start. Is there a difference between a split and a cut? I mean, in the world of video editing, I think I use them synonymously, but are they the same?
I think for the most part, they're the same. But the difference you're going to find is a cut can be the end of a shot and the beginning of a new shot, whereas a split is going to be cutting one piece of footage, right? So, and then maybe adjusting a ways down that footage and bringing them back together. So there could be all sorts of cuts from one clip to another clip. There can be all sorts of splits in a clip. It's a lot of semantics, if I'm being honest. I think you can absolutely use them synonymously. So, and then honestly, like I'll even show a couple of these examples here, but as we talk about them, like know that some of them are kind of interchangeable. And also I don't go through my video editing process and think, oh, I'm doing this type of cut or I'm doing this type of cut. You know, I learned them that way, but you just get into a groove and you know certain things match and certain things work well together. So yeah, all this to say, it may just be easier to show than tell. And then we can talk about it as we go through them. So if you want, we can put the first example up on screen.
Can I ask another question first though? Because
Sure.
I think it's important. So can we first quickly define just kind of around the importance of editing? Because I think it's easy to say, we often say you should edit your videos. But like, I mean, when we've already used words split, cut, you know, like can we define some things here a little bit for our audience?
Yeah.
Because I think, I'm assuming most people will understand these things like just intuitively, like they're doing it. But if not, it'd be really nice, you know, if someone's out there saying, well, I don't know anything about video editing. So let's be really clear. So we've got media on the timeline, right? Mm-hmm. We're taking away, and what's the purpose of taking away or cutting things up? Why would anyone want to do that? And Justin, feel free to jump in here with questions or answers.
Justin's just like, I'm just
no
today.
answers. No answers, man. I might have some questions, but
no, you know more than you let on. So I will say, for me, let's go back to my days of wedding when I was a wedding video producer, and that's a coined phrase now, so you can't take that. So when I'd be shooting a wedding, right, like it's a maybe a 10-hour day of footage or of filming footage. I'm not going to turn over a 10-hour video. So now my job is to find those best moments and what we would refer to as cull the rest, right? So it's trimming just the good stuff into something usable and getting rid of stuff that is, either the camera moved too much or the camera shakes or it's just footage no one wants to watch. Even at a wedding, a lot of people would think like, no, I want the whole thing. But if I give you the whole thing, you won't watch it, or you'll fast forward through the whole thing to get to the good parts anyway. So almost the editor's job is to give you the stuff you wouldn't want to fast forward through.
No, I think that's important context for this, because what we want to establish is some of these techniques to help people to do that, right? Like we don't want people out there thinking, oh, because we say all the time, you need to just edit your video. And that sounds so easy, but in reality, it is not easy. And there's these techniques that we want to get to. So now I think we can go into, let's take a look at some of the things you got prepared for us, Andy, because obviously this is a very visual medium. We want to make sure that we're exploring what it actually looks like.
Absolutely. So this first looping GIF that I made here, and of course, everything you're going to see is going to be inside of TechSmith Camtasia, but these are just principles of video editing. These work in whatever software you're using. And this first clip is of just a standard cut. It's funny you asked the question, right? What's the difference between a cut and a split? Here's an example of a cut. These are two separate pieces of footage. One is this exterior of a house, and it's a tracking back shot where I'm kind of moving away from the house and seeing the exterior. And then you're going to cut to seeing an aerial shot of a neighborhood. By the way, these are clips from TechSmith Assets. I don't think that's the neighborhood, but you don't know that as you watch the video. You see a house, a street, and a neighborhood, and assume in your mind as you're watching them that these two things are related. So this is a standard cut to provide context. And in this case, right, it almost looks like the opening credits of some sitcom, or maybe the end credits of a sitcom as we leave the house and go away. But it's two clips that in this case are related, that just back up to each other, one from the other. There's no transition. There's no anything in between. It is literally a cut and a start of a new clip. So when I say cut too, let me also say it's the end of one clip leading into the beginning of a second clip. There's a definition of a cut, right?
Well, and if I put a transition in there, that's still a cut. It's just got a transition on it.
Yep. So yes, and then it becomes a transition cut, or which, by the way, good job. We'll get there, and we'll get a visual for that, Justin.
Okay.
And I would even
tease.
say, right, and I would even say it's a crossfade when you do a transition, and when we get to the transitions, we can talk a little bit about crossfades and kind of they're not always fades, but you cross from one clip into the other.
Yeah, and I love that.
So that's.
I just want to say, this is the simplest thing you can do, right? Bring two clips together. Yeah. I think it's just great because it's something that anyone can do and employ. But I love, in this case, think about all the stories that we could tell or the messages you can convey about the relationship between those two things. You just happen to do it with a house in a neighborhood, but that could be a person and a house. That could be a person and a thing, two people, right? And by putting them next to each other, that has meaning.
Actually, I'm going to jump. I was going to go to a different type of cut, but I'm going to jump. There's another type of cut that, again, is two shots. And the house kind of does a good example of this, but this clip here is called a cut on action. So we've got a hand at a keyboard, and the hand is typing, and suddenly we've got a man at a desk typing. So now it's still a cut. It's still two different clips, but it's a cut on action. So we're looking at his hands type, and then we're still going to be noticing that this man at a keyboard is typing. Again, clips from video stock footage on TechSmith Assets. No idea if it's the same set of hands, but there's an assumption there, as you see a black keyboard and his hands, that this is the guy typing. So cutting on action is still just cutting, but if his hands had stopped typing for a second and then we cut to a guy typing, it would be slightly off, right? Like we would still expect to see his hands hovering over the keyboard instead of typing if that's where he left off. So this cut on action kind of gives us leeway to jump to a new clip. Again, if it's not even him typing.
Is the idea with that then to tie the two the two clips together with the similar or exact same action?
Right. It's similar content. And again, it kind of relates to the house. Even though I guess the action in the previous clip, if I go back to that previous clip, the action there is going to be that we've got a tracking shot for the camera. So the motion here is actually in the camera, not on what's happening on screen. The camera's backing away from the house. and then the camera's backing away from the neighborhood. So it's this kind of,
Mhm.
I guess I had two cuts on action, didn't even realize it. But it is that, because that's just how my brain works. Like after you do it so long, you just don't even realize,
Mhm.
like I can't break the rules sometimes when I'm trying to even give examples.
Well, I love that it provides this continuity, right? You're looking for continuity between the shots, and like you said, it would be
Right.
weird without that person. If you didn't see him typing still, you would have to wonder like what happened, what changed, why is he not
Right.
typing, and yeah, so I think it's super valuable. And I just want to add from what I've learned from working with Andy and others is that the cool thing is that if you're shooting your videos and you're taking multiple takes, this is why multiple takes works, right? Because you don't have to have it one long continuous thing. You can take any of the takes where, as long as that
Yes.
typing is there, you can fit different things together. And I think that's
Absolutely.
super important when you're making your videos and why you shoot multiple things and then you just take the best ones, the pieces that work together, because you can tie them together even if they're not at the same time.
So if that exactly right, and if I had been the filmmaker shooting this guy in the office, I would have gotten so much what we would refer to as coverage. I would get this shot of his hands on the keyboard. I would get the shot of his hand clicking the mouse. I would get him stop typing like he does right there, where he kind of leans on his hand a bit, and then maybe I'll cut back to him moving the mouse. And so you get a lot of variety. I may only use two of these clips in the entire video, but if I'm doing a video about, Snagit, and I want to show someone clicking and dragging, then him typing on the keyboard doesn't actually work in the shot context, right? Because you're clicking a mouse and dragging the cursor. So I would need to make sure I have coverage for that type of shot. It's just kind of all the things you have to think about. And this is why planning a video is so important, because when you get into the edit after you've already shot the footage, you really want to make sure you have the footage that you need to tell the story.
Well,
Mhm.
all I know is that watching this guy type and get frustrated that something's not working, he's making me frustrated. Like, why can't he just finish what he's writing?
So I'm going to keep on him. And actually, Justin brought up transitions, and I'm going to stay on him and move to a transition and see how it changes the meaning of the cut. So now we've got a transition, and it goes from the keyboard crossfade into him. And does it make you feel anything differently? And maybe it's okay if it doesn't, but is there anything that this infers to you? I'll start with Justin.
That time has lapsed. Maybe that it's not the exact same time. Like what
Exactly.
he was typing right then is not the exact same thing that he's typing now. That there might have been, whether it's 5 seconds or 5 minutes between that segment.
Yeah, 100%. It's like he's writing a really long letter, and maybe he really wants to put some thought into it. So we do this crossfade to show the passage of time. That's not what all crossfades are for, but in this instance, when he's typing and it feels like it took more than 10 seconds to have it happen, it infers meaning. You
Yeah,
can
I
kind of
mean,
accidentally stumble on some of these things.
and I would imagine, Andy, that if we put a different transition on this, it would probably feel different. Like it would have a different meaning,
Yeah.
right?
So another one of my favorites is a fade through black, and it's literally just it fades to black and fades right back in. That's another way of showing a passage of time, but it almost to me feels like a different day sometimes when you use it, or a totally different scenario. It's kind of telling the viewer that, okay, we're done looking at that, and now we're going to look at this. So it's almost a stopping measure while still kind of continuing the video through. So
Well, I love the simplicity of these, right? And I think that's the secret to good editing in my mind is it's just keeping it simple.
mhm.
I know, and we've probably said this in a million other places, but Andy, I know you're of like mind, and Justin probably as well. That if you're in here and you're starting to apply a bunch of transitions, really catch yourself and think, why am I doing
Right.
this?
Mhm.
And really, just going from one clip to another is usually good enough, unless you
Mhm.
have meaning to convey.
One
Meaning
of
is a
the
big part of it. Oh, go ahead, Justin.
I was just gonna say one of the things that I was thinking about with this was like, okay, how do I translate this into screen content, like into a
Hmm.
screen recording of some kind of showing somebody how to do something? But I think like a really simple and effective way that this could happen is like a lot of processes don't need to be shown the entire thing. Like if you've got a loading screen or if you have something that's happening, and I think like a transition, a crossfade like that, where it just you're going in from, this bar is now loading, and then at the end of your fade, now everything's magically loaded, and it's the appearance of time has passed. And I think that could
Yeah.
be kind of an effective way to show that versus, I don't know, maybe traditionally I might just kind of, hard cut as that loads and say, okay, now that's loaded and here we go. Da, 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 da.
So a couple things I'm thinking about, Justin, is first of all, you don't want to ignore it. You don't want to ignore that loading, right? If that's part of the process, give me context that that's going to happen, because that would be frustrating, especially if it's a longer one. You're like, oh gosh, I didn't think this was going to happen. So don't ignore it. So you got to show a little bit of the beginning and you got to show a little bit of the conclusion of it. So, but you're absolutely right. And we've been at TechSmith, I know we've been doing that kind of technique. It's things like loading screens or typing passwords. Like, you don't need to see me fumble to type out my super long password, but the fact that those dots fill in kind of like as a fade is really, really effective to show there's an action that's taking place.
And I think that's a good question, Justin. Like, how do you go from footage to a screen recording? And it's those connections, right? So if you see his fingers typing and then suddenly, like, maybe you've got a 16 character password you just typed in. We've got all but, 13 characters typed before we get to the screen recording. So you're only seeing ... the last 3. So it's that connection of type, and then ... to finish it. Because a lot of people may be tempted to show the entirety of a clip, right? Like, we've got him typing all 16 characters of his password and they're asterisks. So why not show it? Well, because it takes too long and no one has the patience to sit there and watch 16 asterisks, that's a hard word to say, show up on screen. So the passage of time is also kind of a cheat in editing, right? Like, we can fake the passage of time and people understand the meaning.
Absolutely.
So
what else we got here, Andy? These are good.
Other types of cuts. We've got a jump cut, which we've talked about. This clip is a little bit longer, so I'm going to talk over it. We talked about a standard cut, and we talked about splitting. This is more like splitting. So this is one clip of me and audio. And normally, actually, I work with the audio below me, but I made this really quickly. And that's just a visual thing for me. So now I'm cutting out the audio and the video at the same time, and I'll remove gaps, and I'll bring the clips closer together. And now there was a passage of time, because obviously I cut out like 16 seconds between two things that I said. And now if I just play them, and it takes me forever to get to this apparently. Wow, I could have trimmed this. See, I should have edited this. This is what really should have happened. But now if you watch as I hover over the two, there's me looking up and then me talking to the camera. Me looking up, me talking to the camera. That's a jump cut where the framing hasn't changed. I'm still in the exact same scenario. In fact, it's this scenario. But I went suddenly from looking up and thinking camera. A jump cut can be really jarring, actually. You don't want to, well, that one wasn't a GIF. Apparently I loaded a whole video there. So I'm gonna press play on that one and let it play again. You don't want to jar your viewers by having this exact same frame suddenly just shift and be talking about something unrelated, or maybe you picked up mid-sentence during this jump cut. Jump cuts work a lot on YouTube right now. But before YouTube, and I really mean like really before 2006, jump cuts were a violation of standard editing practice. Like, you did not do it. Now, people don't care. There's a lot less, as long as you're not disrupting a chain of, a thought process. People don't really mind as much. Our take on this has shifted a bit as a culture.
So I want to weigh in here, because I know in the learning and development industry, instructional designers, things like this, there's been some debate. And while I don't think it's the most visually pleasing to have jump cuts, I have been using jump cuts like crazy, because especially I've been doing presentation recordings. So these are anywhere from 25 minutes to an hour long. Like, that's my time limit, right? And I'm going through and recording them just as if I would give a live presentation, here in my little office or whatever. And I always end up with stuff that's not good because I made a mistake, and I'll like correct myself. And instead of trying to like script out an hour-long thing, I'm just going and putting in jump cuts. And honestly, as long as there's a connected thought, I actually don't mind it. And I've gotten I feel like I've gotten better at editing, so it's less noticeable. But for me, it's just been a lifesaver to be able to do that. And in fact, I would recommend that if you're trying to go fast, jump cuts are really great. And I don't think I don't think it feels like a violation anymore. Like somehow we've broken some sacred video rule. I think it's just, it's in vogue. Maybe that will go away at some point, who knows? But I feel like right now, I feel really confident that jump cuts look okay. People will recognize it for what it is. It's like, oh no, they're just fixing a mistake or cutting something out I didn't need.
And whereas we were showing the passage of time with some of the other edits, this one actually saves us time when we're watching it, right? Rather than watch the long, drawn out pauses while I think about my next thought and then move on to it, like cut that out. We don't need to watch the whole thought process. We can just jump from one thought to the next. The other thing, and I didn't cover this, is we never talk about B-roll. B-roll is additional footage, or even like a slide presentation can be considered B-roll. You can put another visual clip over a jump cut to really kind of protect your viewers from that disruption if you want them to look at something else while you're cutting. And that's going to take us to different types of cuts, like L cuts and J cuts.
Well, one second.
I'll jump to this.
I want to hear from Justin.
Yeah.
Justin, do you have
went back.
feelings about jump cuts? I mean, you're
Yeah,
not making videos all the time.
Sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think for the jump cut stuff, you know, and it's hard to, especially if you're listening to this, to kind of understand what's being shown on screen, but essentially it's taking the gaps in the audio or maybe a gap in a thought and kind of just cutting it out and smushing it all together to where you've got the sentence might not be a pure formed sentence, but the thought makes sense. And so it gives a very clean, you know, sped up way to, like you were saying, it helps the viewer. It actually is, I think now, and again, if your viewers are okay with it, and I think, you know, most people are probably okay with it now, just given the state of YouTube, etc. But you know, it's actually beneficial as a viewer to watch, to not have to watch you go like you cut all those out and move all your thoughts, and now you just have a nice clean thought. That's actually beneficial to me as a viewer, and I think it's something that now, as I watch different videos, I don't even notice it.
Yeah.
Well, we should probably jump cut this whole episode. Just cut my parts out.
Just I don't want to hear you saying erg.
Erg.
No erg.
I did like erg. That was a good one. So we were talking about L and J cuts. So when I mentioned B-roll, this is an image that I took from Guy Larkham, who wrote a great blog post for TechSmith on this topic, and we'll try to put a link to the show to this blog in the show notes. But he does a really good job of visualizing an L cut and a J cut. So this is one of those things. I really apologize to anyone only listening because this is so visual. When you have footage of a speaker talking, an individual, your subject matter expert, maybe. So in this first clip, we have Guy talking, and his audio is underneath. Then he is, so I had to click on it to actually show where I was clicking. So Guy's speaking, his audio is beneath him, and his audio continues on under this. He's talking about how to set up a tripod. Well, when you want to set up a tripod, what you're going to do is, and as he's talking to the camera, we start to look at footage of the tripod being set up. He's still talking. We still hear his voice. The video and audio track together now have been split, and the video has been shortened, but the audio goes on, and it makes the shape of an L. It's that simple. So that kind of cut is called an L cut, where the audio carries on under the next clip. The reverse of that, because if you look, a J is basically the reverse shape of an L. The reverse of that is when you start with B-roll footage, and in this case, he's talking about putting an iPhone clip on a tripod. Then his audio for the shot of him looking at the camera is underneath the B-roll, and eventually we cut back to seeing him speak directly to the camera. So it's a little much to talk about, but the idea is you're hearing his narration, and at first you're staring at him in an L cut, and at first you're staring at the B-roll in a J cut, and then you cut to seeing him speaking. Whew.
And anyone listening just has no idea what we're talking about. So go over to YouTube, find the Visual Lounge, find this episode, and you can see it. We'll put links in the show note. But here's the thing I've been thinking about this, Andy, is that because I don't know anything about J cuts or L cuts, really. I mean, no one taught me this stuff. No one said that this is the way you should do things. But what I really like is that it gives you a smooth way to make that process of showing what you're talking about, rather because oftentimes in you know, if we have a speaker, we also have things that we want to show, right? Like, and I feel like it just gives me a methodology to think about how am I going to piece these together, and that it's okay to have that overlap, right? Like, you don't have to cut the audio too,
right,
when you have new footage. Like, they're just gonna kind of be together.
You don't have to wait till the speaker's done talking before introducing the visual that they're talking about. So yeah, and in this instance, I had recorded a little video just to test it, but I figured the image of it was kind of better than even showing the video, especially because as an MP4 through a presentation software, through an internet streaming software, it was just easier to show the visual in this case. But here you can see I've got this clip of classroom desks and chairs. I'm talking about an educational topic, and then you cut to me at the end of the shot. That's a J cut. The reverse of that, of course, me talking first is an L cut. And again, you can just see on the timeline, they make the shape of the letter. That's why it's referred to as that. It's no real big complicated mystery.
But at the end of the day, it's still a cut. Yeah. It's just a cut.
It's just a cut. No, that's not even true. It's just a cut of the video,
right?
And the audio remains, right? So this is still the narrative audio line holding through. Which I wanted to bring up something that I didn't even think about when I was making this presentation. If I go back to that cut on action of the guy with the keyboard, this would have been an opportune time for me to include a J cut. So this second clip of him at the keyboard where he ends his typing, if I bring the audio of him typing before that under this B-roll shot of the close-up of the hands, it could be this audio of him actually at his desk typing, and then he stops and kind of hums, right? So that would have made a good example of a J cut because, again, B-roll first and then to the shot with the audio. So that's a very visual one. That's the only one that I struggle explaining to anyone who's just listening. But hopefully, I mean, if you hold up your hands and you make an L with one side and, a reverse L, it's not really a J, with the other side, you can see kind of what we're talking about. The thumb on either example being your audio line, which carries under the next track or the previous track.
Now, I think this is great because I think what happens is a lot of us are self-taught. We know that we need to cut things out, but seeing these has been very helpful for me. I know, just to kind of get my head around like, okay, what else can I be doing? How can I be thinking about making my videos cleaner and better? The only thing I've got to say, Andy, is I love, and it was funny to watch your little clip of video editing because I love using the magnetic track in Camtasia, so I don't have to remove those gaps on manually.
It's true. And I use the magnetic tracks a lot, but the problem is usually I have multi-tracks going on, right? So I've got, 13 tracks of video, and if I turn on magnetic tracks for any number of them, it can screw up the bigger project. So if I'm working on something small like that would have been a perfect example for using magnetic tracks, right?
Isn't he so fancy with his 13-track videos?
13's low, actually.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think what this makes me think, though, is, so when in your video editing, like, when are you doing these primarily, these edits, right? Like these splitting, cutting, are you doing it as you go? Or is it like, are you trying to get all your main footage first? Like, I know I've gotten these longer videos I mentioned before. I know what I'm doing, but I'm curious, like, when are you kind of doing your bulk of your cutting and splitting?
So I'm not 100% sure what you mean by when, but if this is right, let me know. So if we were to look at like some of the interviews,
what's that? There's no right answer. There's no right answer.
So if we look at some of the interviews that we conducted on the TechSmith Academy, right? We did the interviews on training and learning and on marketing. Whenever we have, you as the host and then a guest as the interviewer, we will use like an L or a J cut quite often because we want that guest's narrative to go under, but maybe we moved the camera on the guest, or maybe we just have been looking at them too long. We need something to break up the shot. So we'll cut to you for a reaction shot where you're nodding, or we'll cut to a 2-shot, but we still have that one underlying audio track going through. So multicam edits are a time where I use them a lot. But honestly, any video, I think standard cut is going to come into play all the time. Especially, we also talk about like shot, reverse shot. So, say you've got someone, running or jogging on camera, and they're just looking right at the camera or looking off camera, and they're jogging towards the camera direction. And then suddenly we cut and we see them kind of jogging away. Shot, reverse shot, right? It's also a cut on action, but it tells us kind of the story of like this person's going that direction, or they're leaving, or they're, on a journey. So any of these kind of simple edits end up helping us tell our longer or larger story.
So that's an awesome answer. What I was thinking about was the idea that like I try to, like when I'm doing these presentation edits, I don't add anything to my video at all. No transitions, no B-roll, nothing until I've gotten kind of the good bits, right? And then figure out how I'm going to piece them together.
Gotcha.
Because you mentioned something, you said that like, oh, if I do magnetic track, it's going to mess everything up. But I'm thinking if that my stuff's not cut first, yeah, editing gets messy. So I try to do all my cuts, get out just the parts I want, and then add my B-roll, add my any effects, music, things like that in that process. But that's
True.
me,
Yeah.
and I don't know what I'm doing.
That's true. And if your audio and your video is connected, because sometimes when we do this, like with the J and the L cuts, you kind of have to separate your audio and video tracks so that you can manipulate just the video line. As long as they're connected and not separated, then doing those cuts keeps everything together. But once you separate them, if you cut the video and the magnetic track pulls them together, your audio is out of sync after that cut. And so that's the only thing is I do a lot of disconnected audio and video. So if it was more of like one shot, one line of audio, yes, absolutely. Then you throw your B-roll in. And I would just encourage anyone too, if you're using B-roll or presentation slides or something to kind of cover your shot, that's a great place to cover mistakes. Like I use those all the time. As much as I want to be like, prepare, we all have cuts that we just can't get around, or like, man, I really have to cut this out and I don't have a secondary shot. Throw some B-roll, throw a slide, throw a visual up, and then you cover that mistake and no one will know except you. And you can even kind of blush a little bit at your point of pride that you hit that mistake.
Yeah, I did that. I did that once. Recently, I was walking through a website, and I was trying to film myself separate from the screen. But I did the cut of me explaining what it was, separate from doing any sort of screen recording. And I had one of those moments where you just have to take like a breath, like you're just talking, you just stop.
Yeah,
you got to take that breath. And but the way it worked out, like the cut, it looked awful. Like the sound, the way it sounded was totally fine. So what I did, I just started to throw up the image of the website I was talking about, covered up that whole thing, and nobody was the wiser.
No one knows. In fact, sometimes I won't get too deep into it, but I was going to say sometimes your audio needs a little crossfade too, right? Like maybe I yawn in the middle of speaking or do take a big breath or something, and then you may hear like that kind of tongue slapping against the roof of your mouth. You want to cut that out, and then like you just need to kind of do a little gentle audio crossfade between the two so it doesn't sound like anything was cut. There's no gaps. We talk about as editors, we talk about room tone. A room has a tone. When you have a microphone going, if I suddenly was to cut my audio, you'd lose that tone. And so we kind of will carry over like those gaps of just dead air. That's a little too complicated, but you get my drift. Like there's always ways of covering those mistakes and kind of faking your way through the end of the video.
Would love it. This has been awesome. I have learned some things today. I hope everyone else listening has learned some things today. Go check out the video again. The visuals will make this much clearer if you're just listening. We hope it was good enough to get you through because I think this is awesome. Thank you, Andy, for taking us down this path. We're going to have our final take. And Justin, for your perspective, if you want to say something, you can say something you learned. But we just want to remind everybody, if you are listening to the Visual Lounge, please, hit the review button, hit the like button. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Leave a comment, ask us questions. Let us know what we could be talking about that would help make your life a little bit better in video creation. And we appreciate you guys tuning in, of course. So with that.
And real quick though, Matt, I will say, if they want to find all these episodes in one spot, you can watch all these episodes at techsmith.com/video review/video workflow. And you can watch them all at once, including this one that you can see all the ins and outs that Andy actually showed. So
that's right. Thank you for that reminder. So final take, we're going to do a little bit different order. I'll start us off and then we'll go with Justin, and then Andy, you get to close us out today. So,
that's good.
Okay, my final take is just edit. That's it. Be good at it. Learn, practice. That's it. Edit.
Be good at
it. Get better. It's not, this is the thing. It's going to take practice, but just apply these techniques and it will make your video way better.
Yeah, I think for me, it is with the J-cut stuff or with the jump cuts. It's okay to do jump cuts. It's sort of an accepted trend that you can sort of lean into, and it actually can enhance your video in ways that you might think otherwise that it might be a detriment to your video. So I think it's okay. Try it. You might like it, you might not, but I think giving it a whirl is a good option.
Yeah. I think, honestly, I would start by saying keep it simple. Your first few edits, you're learning, give yourself some grace. But once you have the opportunity, build it up a little more. Apply meaning with a transition, or apply meaning from one shot to the next. Cover mistakes. It's okay to have mistakes. I've been doing this 20 years. I'm still covering mistakes with B-roll footage or screen recording. But that's what editors do. We take all the bad stuff out and leave you with just the finest, hopefully, so that you actually enjoy watching the video and it was worth your time.
Awesome. Thanks for those final takes. And we will be with you guys again next time. And hopefully, maybe we should edit some of our worst stuff out. Maybe I should do another final take. Anyway, thanks everybody for watching. We will see you guys all next time. Thanks.